Late June in Chicago always brings that thick, suffocating humidity. But inside the Sterling family's multi-million-dollar mansion on the wealthy North Shore, the atmosphere was lively and loud. The air was filled with the heavy scent of custom designer perfume, expensive vintage champagne, and the sharp clinking of crystal glasses. Tonight was the 60th birthday of my mother-in-law, Lenora. The entire ground floor looked like a luxury greenhouse, decorated with thousands of white roses flown in that morning. The guest list was packed with my husband's high-profile business partners and Lenora's country club circle, a group of competitive diamond-covered women who spent their lives trying to outshine each other. Under the massive crystal chandelier in the grand living room, the bright lights showed off their heavy makeup, their rehearsed smiles, and the diamond necklaces glowing around their necks. And then there was me, the official lady of the house, trapped in the sweltering, narrow prep kitchen at the back of the estate. My shirt had been soaked with sweat since 5 in the morning. I had driven to the wholesale market myself, picking through live Maine lobsters and shaving fresh black truffles, spending the entire day over a hot stove like an unpaid servant, all to prepare a 5-course French dinner for over 30 demanding guests. The Sterling family could easily afford a top-tier private catering team. But Lenora was cheap and cruel to her core. She loved to brag and complain at her club that she had a stay-at-home daughter-in-law who did nothing all day. In her mind, since I lived under their roof without a formal 9-to-5, I had to earn my keep by handling everything myself, using it as proof of my loyalty and respect for the family. Loyalty. I stirred the pot of simmering truffle broth, letting out a quiet, bitter scoff. 5 years in this marriage had taken me from a top-ranking Wharton economics graduate with a brilliant future and turned me into nothing more than an appliance for this household. A sudden burst of applause echoed from the living room. I heard the sharp, arrogant click of stilettos against the polished marble floor. It was Crisa, my golden child sister-in-law, home from work. At 27, Crisa was a project director at a major subsidiary of one of the Midwest's largest real estate conglomerates. With a $400,000 base salary and massive bonuses, she carried herself like royalty in this house, treating me like an insect that did not even deserve eye contact. I carefully took off my stained apron, picked up a heavy sterling silver tray with the steaming bowls of soup, and headed out to serve the final course. As I stepped into the room, I saw Crisa surrounded by a circle of guests. She was wearing an absurdly expensive custom Chanel silk gown, holding a glass of vintage red wine, with her chin tilted high, soaking in every drop of flattery from Lenora's friends. An older woman with an emerald necklace exclaimed that Crisa was so young and accomplished, and that with a salary like hers, any family would roll out the red carpet just for a chance to marry her. Crisa let out a sharp, boastful laugh. As I approached with the heavy tray, she caught me in the corner of her eye. She reached out, pretending to take a bowl from the tray, but the second her manicured fingers touched the porcelain rim, her wrist jerked downward with force. The bowl crashed against the marble floor, shattering into sharp pieces. Boiling hot broth splashed straight across my bare shins. My skin turned bright red, blistering almost instantly under the heat. The intense burning sent tears rushing to my eyes. Before I could even let out a gasp of pain, a vicious slap cracked across my face. The sharp sound echoed across the grand hall, cutting through the laughter like a knife. I stumbled back half a step, my cheek burning and my ears ringing. I looked up, glaring at Crisa in shock and anger. My sister-in-law stood over me, casually dusting off the hand she had just used to strike me. Her eyes were wide with venom. Pointing a manicured finger right at my face, she began to scream. She asked if I was blind, yelling that the soup was boiling hot and accusing me of trying to burn her hand so she could not sign a multi-million-dollar contract the next day. She called me a useless parasite who could not even carry a plate properly. Then, with a cold smirk, She said that in this house, I was nothing more than a maid. Dead silence fell over the room. Porch. Over 30 pairs of eyes locked onto me. Some had looks of fake pity, but most were filled with open amusement and contempt. My chest tightened with humiliation. I turned toward my husband, Theron. He was standing in the corner holding a glass of scotch, watching his wife get slapped in front of 30 guests. Yet he did not take a single step forward. Porch. He just frowned, looking annoyed, as if I were the one ruining his networking event. Lenora slowly rose from her velvet armchair, adjusting her pearls, and walked over to stand next to her daughter. Her glare was sharp enough to cut. She asked what Kreza had said wrong, and questioned how I dared to glare back. Porch. She reminded me that Kreza was a corporate executive managing multi-million-dollar portfolios with real status in this city, claiming her time was worth 100,000 times more than mine. She criticized me for breaking fine porcelain, claiming I spent my days living off their money like a lifeless freeloader. Porch. She wondered aloud if her son had lost his mind 5 years ago by marrying a penniless girl with zero family background. I gritted my teeth against the burning pain in my legs and told her that Kreza had knocked the bowl over on purpose and that holding a heavy tray gave me no control over her sudden move. Porch. I reminded her that I was her daughter-in-law, the one who worked day and night in the kitchen to take care of everyone, not a parasite, and certainly not a maid for her daughter to hit and insult. I turned back to Theron and asked him if he was really just going to stand there and watch me be humiliated without saying a single word. Porch. Theron lowered his voice in an irritated growl, telling me to shut my mouth. He told me to stop embarrassing him in front of his guests, saying Kreza brought in real money and was under massive pressure at work. He brushed off the slap, asking if it really cost me anything, and ordered me to get on my knees right then, clean up the mess, and apologize to his sister so he could save face. Porch. I could no longer hold back my anger. I asked him if he really expected me to apologize for being assaulted without reason, questioning if he even had an ounce of integrity left. I reminded him that 5 years ago, when his construction company was on the verge of bankruptcy and liquidation, I was the one who emptied my personal savings and skipped meals to keep his business alive. Porch. I reminded him that when Kreza was a fresh graduate who could not land a single interview, I spent nights fixing her resume and coaching her through business negotiations to help her break into a corporate firm, and now that she was making money, she turned on me, while he stood with his mother and sister to push me into the dirt. Porch. Lenora let out a shrill laugh, asking who I thought I was to talk back to my mother-in-law in her own house and disrespect my husband. She dismissed the money I had provided years ago, calling it nothing compared to their family wealth, and accusing me of trying to take credit. Porch. She claimed Kreza succeeded purely because of their superior family genes, calling me a gold digger who attached herself to Theron the moment she saw an opportunity. Lenora stepped closer, pointing in my face, and stated plainly that in this house, the one who brings in the money sets the rules. Porch. She said someone like me needed to know my place, demanding that I get on my knees and clean Kreza's shoes. Money and power, that was their only religion. I gave a slow nod, a cold and clear smile forming at the corner of my lips. I told her that since she had put it so clearly, there was no reason for me to stay in this house any longer. My voice was calm but freezing cold. Porch. I told them to clean up their own mess, because from that exact second, I was no longer the Sterling family's daughter-in-law. I said they were welcome to live on their precious $400,000 salary, and that I would watch how long their luxury lasted without the woman who kept everything running. Porch. Theron yelled in fury, daring me to walk out that door, warning that if I left with nothing tonight, I would be begging on the streets by morning, questioning how I could even survive without him providing for me. Kreza joined in with a mocking laugh, asking who I thought I was threatening, telling me not to flatter myself by thinking they would beg me to come back. Porch. She told me to get out, saying she would wait to see how quickly I came crawling back to knock on their door once reality set in. I looked straight at Theron's twisted, angry face. My chest rose and fell, holding back a storm of quiet rage, but I did not shed a single tear. All the hurt had completely burned away any remaining weakness inside me. 5 of my best years. Porch. I had locked my top honors Wharton economics degree in a drawer to play the role of a devoted homemaker, only to be met with complete contempt by the very people I had supported. They thought I was incompetent. They worshipped Krisa's corporate salary, completely blind to the fact that the very foundation Krisa stood on had been built and sustained by my own hands. I did not say another word. Porch. I slowly untied my apron and dropped it directly into the puddle of broken porcelain and truffle broth on the floor. It made almost no sound as it landed, but it marked an absolute end. I turned around, keeping my back straight, and walked barefoot over the sharp fragments toward the front door. Behind me, whispers broke out among the guests, mixed with Lenora's sharp remarks and Krisa's laughter. Porch. The moment I pushed open the heavy oak doors, the Chicago sky opened up into a downpour. Rain whipped against the trees lining the wealthy street, the fierce wind matching the storm building inside me. I walked into the dark, rainy night, letting the freezing water soak through my clothes. Porch. It washed away the kitchen grease, and it washed away every trace of quiet compliance I had carried for years. The wind was biting, but the drive for complete accountability burned brighter than ever. They loved using financial power to step on others. They loved using material status to strip away basic respect. Porch. I decided right then to use the very leverage they worshipped to bring their entire illusion down. I pulled my phone from my soaked pocket and wiped the screen. The glass lit up, reflecting a sharp, focused expression. The quiet, accommodating daughter-in-law had ceased to exist the moment I walked out of that house. I dialed an encrypted number. It picked up on the second ring. Porch. Looking at the lightning cutting across the sky, I took a steady breath. The real game had just begun. They could enjoy the rest of their luxury party tonight. Because by the time the sun came up, the wealth and business empire they took for granted would face a complete collapse. The heavy rain kept coming down, cold drops hitting my face, but it did nothing to slow the focus in my mind. Porch. I stood under the awning of a closed convenience store, pushed my wet hair back, and held the phone firmly to my ear. On the other end came a deep, respectful voice. It was Arthur Pendleton, an elite hedge fund manager and the public-facing CEO of Apex Holdings, the massive corporate entity I had built behind the scenes. He greeted me politely and asked for my instructions. Porch. I spoke clearly, making sure every word carried total authority. I told Arthur to have legal and HR prepare 2 immediate actions. First, draft an immediate termination notice for Krisa Sterling, project director at the group's real estate subsidiary. Porch. Second, issue a unilateral termination of all material supply contracts with Sterling Construction and trigger the acceleration clauses tied to their existing debt. Arthur did not ask a single question. At this level of corporate strategy, execution was everything. He simply confirmed that everything would be in place by 8 o'clock the next morning. Porch. I hung up, leaned against the cold brick wall, and closed my eyes. The thunder rolling above brought back memories of the past 5 years, the years I had set aside my own identity to carry this family. 5 years ago, when I married Theron, his company was on the brink of liquidation. Back then, I was an Ivy League economics graduate, with offers from top investment banks. Porch. But out of love and promises made under moonlight, I gave it all up. Theron had practically broken down in front of me, pleading with me to save his life's work. Without hesitation, I liquidated the personal assets left to me, reached out to my alumni network, and worked day and night rebuilding his financial models and restructuring his debt, pulling his failing firm back from the edge. Porch. And what was my reward? The moment the business turned profitable and began to expand, Theron asked me to step back. He framed it as protecting me, claiming men should handle the corporate battlefield while women took care of the home. I believed him, stepped away from the corporate world, and became a full-time homemaker. It was a complete mistake. Torch. To ungrateful people, personal sacrifice looks like weakness. The moment my name was no longer attached to visible revenue, the Sterling family changed completely. Lenora went from tearfully thanking me to treating me with pure class prejudice. She criticized every dollar spent on groceries, judged my clothing, and treated my presence in the house as freeloading. Then came Crisa. When she graduated from a low-tier college, her professional skills were practically non-existent. She failed 6 consecutive corporate interviews. I spent countless nights teaching her how to read financial statements, how to analyze the Chicago real estate market, and editing every email she drafted. But the moment she secured a position at an Apex Holdings subsidiary and entered the corporate class, she flipped completely, bossing me around like household staff. The entire family banded together to push me down, and Theron started buying into his mother's and sister's narrative, viewing me as an embarrassment to his success. They had no idea who they were dealing with. A top-tier economist does not simply stop analyzing systems. Their cold treatment 2 years ago had served as my wake-up call. On cold winter nights when they were fast asleep in their luxury bedrooms, I was sitting in the chilly kitchen with an old laptop, using a small private fund I had quietly held onto. I engaged in algorithmic trading, high-risk real estate acquisitions, and precision market shorting. The investments paid off, massively, multiplying my capital hundreds of times over. Knowing the power of strategic structure, I established Apex Holdings through an offshore trust and hired Arthur, a seasoned Wall Street veteran, to act as the public CEO. Apex expanded rapidly, acquiring major real estate developments and key construction supply chains across the Midwest. The irony was undeniable. The real estate firm where Crisa worked happened to be acquired by Apex Holdings. The only reason she was promoted to project director was because I had personally signed off on those high-level corporate approvals as the ultimate principal. Even more ironic was Theron's construction company, which he constantly bragged about. In reality, it was an empty shell, barely staying liquid because of a heavily discounted, exclusive materials contract provided by Apex Holdings. Theron had practically begged Arthur to sign that deal, never suspecting that the person keeping his business afloat was the very wife he treated like domestic help. I had originally planned to reveal everything when the time was right, hoping they might show genuine gratitude so we could move forward together. But Crisa's slap, along with Theron's and Lenora's complete disrespect, erased any reason to hold back. A black town car pulled up in front of the Ritz-Carlton downtown. I stepped out, soaked in rain, but completely composed. The front desk manager immediately recognized the exclusive black card in my hand, offering a respectful greeting before escorting me directly to the presidential suite on the top floor. I sank into the warm bath, letting the heat wash away every trace of the quiet lifestyle I had tolerated for years. Afterward, I changed into a silk robe, poured a glass of Cabernet, and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Lightning flickered through the clouds as I took a slow sip, feeling the absolute clarity of independence. I picked up my secondary phone. Months earlier, to ensure Lenora was not going through my private legal documents while I was away, I had placed a discreet audio monitor in a corner of the living room. The live feed was streaming clearly. Lenora's shrill voice came through the speaker, telling Theron not to go looking for me. She said leaving me out in the rain would teach me a lesson, claiming the house would not fall apart without me, and that she would hire a cleaning service the next day. She called me an ungrateful freeloader for answering back to her and Crisa, saying I would not last 3 days before begging at their front door for forgiveness. Theron's cold voice followed, telling his mother not to worry, because he had no intention of bringing me back. He complained that I had embarrassed him in front of his business partners by throwing down the apron, saying he could not look weak. He defended Krisa, saying she worked hard under high pressure, and that getting hit was nothing to make a scene over, calling me narrow-minded. He added that he would change the locks the next morning and cancel all supplementary credit cards, waiting to see how I survived with nothing. Listening to them, I let out a quiet laugh. People who measure everything by immediate appearances are completely blind to the structural collapse heading straight toward them. Canceling my cards meant nothing. That basic card with its tiny $3,000 limit had been untouched for years. They thought Krisa's corporate salary made them untouchable, treating it as the ultimate measure of worth. I was ready to see how their arrogance held up once that foundation disappeared. I set the phone down and walked into the walk-in closet, fully stocked with tailored designer power suits prepared by the hotel. The past was finished. The next morning would mark the beginning of a complete corporate reckoning. At 7 a.m, bright summer sunlight filled the suite. I woke up feeling completely energized. No more waking up at 4:30 to cook for an ungrateful household, and no more dealing with endless domestic demands. I had a quiet breakfast from room service, put on a sharp cream-colored silk suit paired with black pointed heels, and styled my hair into a sleek, professional bun. Looking in the mirror, the exhausted woman from the night before was completely gone, replaced by the executive who held ultimate decision-making power over thousands of careers. I picked up the phone, put it on speaker, and called the HR director at Krisa's subsidiary directly. The man answered with immediate deference, knowing the call originated directly from the corporate chair's private office. I gave a brief, direct instruction to terminate the employment of Project Director Krisa Sterling immediately, bypassing standard internal reviews. If state labor regulations required severance, the company would pay it in full. Security was to supervise her packing and ensure she was escorted out of the building before 9 a.m. Meanwhile, according to my assistant's updates, Krisa walked into the corporate lobby at 8, carrying herself like she owned the place. She swung a $5,000 handbag, wearing oversized designer sunglasses, fully convinced she was arriving to receive a promotion to regional vice president. She tossed her car keys onto the reception desk, demanding an oat latte be delivered to her office, walking past her colleagues without acknowledging anyone. Relying on her title and income, she had treated the workplace like her personal territory. She pushed open her office door, expecting congratulatory flowers. Instead, she found an empty cardboard box sitting in the center of her desk. Standing beside it was the HR director, accompanied by 2 security guards with their arms crossed. Krisa took off her sunglasses, frowning, and demanded to know why they were in her office without knocking. The HR director remained completely professional. He slid an official termination notice, with the corporate seal across the desk, informing her that under state employment guidelines, her termination was effective immediately. Furthermore, due to serious breaches of corporate conduct and professional ethics, the firm reserved all legal rights. She was officially let go. Her executive salary, her corporate title, and her elite social standing were wiped out with a single document. Krisa picked up the paper, her hands shaking. She stared at the text, then looked at the HR director, assuming it was an elaborate joke. She lost control completely, shouting across the office. She slammed her hands on the desk, claiming she was the top producer, managing billion-dollar developments, screaming that they had no legal right to fire her, and demanding to speak with the CEO. The HR director gave a calm response, stating that this was a direct executive directive from the anonymous board chair of Apex Holdings, and that someone at her level had no authorization to question the decision or request an audience. Security moved in immediately. They packed her personal items into the box and escorted her through the floor in front of hundreds of watching employees, walking her out to the street. Krisa, the woman who had stood in a luxury living room the night before delivering insults and calling me a maid, was now standing on the sidewalk with a cardboard box, her pride completely dismantled. Right then, my phone rang. Orch. Theron's name flashed across the screen. I answered calmly, offering a casual greeting. Theron yelled through the receiver, demanding to know where I was hiding. He claimed I had left the kitchen in complete disarray for his mother to deal with, giving me 30 minutes to get back to the house, apologize to his mother, clean up the mess, and make lunch. Orch. He added that he had an important material supply contract to sign with Apex Holdings that afternoon and had no time for games, threatening to lock me out permanently. I let out a soft laugh, asking if he was still hungover or if the wind had carried away my words from the night before. I reminded him that I was no longer his wife or his domestic help, telling him he could handle his own dishes. Orch. I told him not to worry about changing the locks, because I had no intention of returning, advising him to focus on his afternoon meeting instead of shouting at me. Then I casually suggested he tell his mother to prepare some comfort food for his sister, since she might be coming home early. Orch. Lenora's voice cut in sharply as she grabbed the phone, calling me disrespectful and claiming Krisa was on track to become vice president. She warned that I would end up with nothing on the streets, threatening that Theron would file for divorce and leave me with nothing, claiming she would never forgive me, even if I begged. Orch. I told her to keep those exact words in mind, advising her to have the divorce papers drafted, because I would gladly sign them. I told them to enjoy their remaining time, reminding them that Krisa should watch her spending, because soon enough, she might not even have cash for basic daily expenses. Orch. I ended the call and placed her number on the block list to keep things quiet before the main event unfolded. I dialed Arthur again, authorizing the next phase. I instructed him to terminate all material supply lines to Theron's construction firm, freeze every line of credit Apex Holdings had backed for him, and initiate a full financial audit. Orch. Standing by the glass window, I took a sip of black coffee. The bitter taste gave way to a clean, smooth finish. They had no idea what was unfolding. They still assumed I was wandering the streets with nowhere to go. People who build their entire worldview around looking down on others rarely see real accountability coming until it arrives at their door. Orch. Removing Krisa from her role was just the opening step. Being dismissed immediately from a top firm meant more than losing a paycheck. It was a permanent red flag on her professional record. The Chicago commercial real estate sector was small. Orch. The news that Krisa Sterling had been blacklisted by the leadership of Apex Holdings would move through industry circles within hours, ensuring no reputable firm would take her on. I sat on the couch with my tablet, reviewing financial filings and market positions. The burn on my leg had been treated with medical ointment, the physical sting replaced by a calm, calculated focus. Orch. I had built their foundation years ago, and now I was simply withdrawing my support. There was no hesitation, because continuing to support people who show total disrespect only invites more mistreatment. By midday, the atmosphere inside the Sterling estate was suffocating. Orch. Krisa, the daughter who had bragged about her income and treated others like domestic staff, was collapsed on the velvet sofa. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smeared with tears. The box of office supplies had been kicked over, luxury stationery and desk items scattered across the floor. She was crying uncontrollably, hitting the cushions in frustration. Orch. She could not comprehend how an executive on the verge of closing major deals could be dismissed so abruptly without explanation. Lenora sat beside her, pale and anxious, trying to offer comfort while her hands trembled. Their primary household income and main source of social pride had vanished in a single morning. Orch. Krisa desperately dialed every corporate contact, vice president, an industry partner she knew, begging for a new position or asking someone to reach out to executive leadership on her behalf. But every call ended in a quick hang-up or a polite deflection. No one was willing to associate with someone flagged by Apex Holdings. Word had already spread through private executive networks that she had crossed the group's ultimate leadership. She screamed in anger, calling her former company ungrateful and cursing the anonymous board chair who had cut her off. Completely unaware that the person who signed the order was the sister-in-law she had struck the night before. Lenora cried out in distress, asking who Kriza could have offended when everything seemed fine. She questioned how they could fire someone with that salary, suggesting Kriza try to persuade the HR director to speak to the board chair. She panicked over the monthly payments on the luxury car, her country club access, and her personal expenses, wondering what had gone wrong with their luck. Then, Lenora's eyes widened as if struck by a realization. She claimed that I had brought bad luck to the household, insisting that my departure the night before had caused their sudden misfortune and blaming everything on me. Listening to the live audio, I could not help but laugh. Their habit of deflecting responsibility was almost impressive. Even now, Lenora chose to blame me rather than acknowledging that their own arrogance and cruelty had triggered this exact outcome. The situation for the Sterling family was about to get much worse. While Kriza was still crying, the front door swung open and Theron walked in. He looked completely drained, sweat running down his neck, his tie pulled loose and his eyes bloodshot. He threw his leather briefcase onto the floor, the heavy thud echoing through the living room. Theron had just returned from the meeting at Apex Holdings. Instead of securing the critical supply agreement, he had been handed a formal notice of termination. Apex had ended all current supply agreements. Arthur had enforced a strict default penalty clause, a term I had carefully structured into the original corporate agreements years ago. On top of that, Apex demanded the immediate settlement of high-interest bridge financing, closing every financial exit. His construction business had survived entirely on the discounted materials provided by Apex. With that supply line cut off, every single active job site under his name faced an immediate halt. To make matters worse, commercial lenders reacted instantly to the news, freezing his business credit lines. In a single morning, Theron had gone from a self-proclaimed successful CEO to facing complete operational shutdown, potential corporate liquidation, and $15 million in immediate liabilities. What on earth is happening to this family? Theron roared. What is Kriza crying about? Mother, do you have any idea what just happened? My company is finished. Apex Holdings cut off every single contract. They are calling in our debts right now. If I cannot produce $15 million in liquid cash within 3 days, they will drag me into bankruptcy court and liquidate every asset we own. This mansion, my entire business, we will all end up with nothing on the street. Theron looked around the wrecked living room like a desperate man. I have been calling Vesper all morning. Whenever the company was in trouble before, she always managed to pull out some emergency cash. Call her right now. Get her back here. Make her hand over her money so I can work my contacts. Hurry up. It is all because Kriza started drama last night and ruined our luck. Lenora wailed. Bankruptcy? $15 million? My God, where are we supposed to get $15 million? Kriza was fired from the firm this morning. She still owes payments on her Mercedes. Vesper walked out last night, and I gave her an earful over the phone this morning. She does not have any money anyway. I made her transfer all her savings into our joint account years ago. What are we going to do? Son, go down to Apex Holdings, get on your knees, and beg the CEO for mercy. If this family falls apart, how am I supposed to survive? $15 million. To me, that was pocket change. But to them, it was an inescapable trap tightening around their necks with every passing hour. Theron, the man who had once promised under the moonlight to stand by me forever, had an immediate instinct during a crisis to calculate how to drain his wife of every last cent. The very wife he had treated like dirt, his cowardice and lack of shame were fully exposed. There they were, turning on each other in their luxury living room, throwing blame back and forth without having the slightest clue where the blow had actually come from. They still believed this was just random market volatility. Creasa assumed it was internal corporate politics. Theron convinced himself it was an industry-wide shift. Not a single one of them suspected the penniless daughter-in-law they had thrown out into the rain. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my suite, crossing my arms as I looked down at the city streets. Dark clouds were still rolling across the sky. The storm was far from over. When backed into a corner, desperate people always scramble for a scapegoat, or what they assume is their final lifeline. They had nowhere left to turn, which meant they would start searching frantically for me. I picked up my phone and removed Theron's number from the blocked list. 3 seconds later, the device started vibrating nonstop. I did not answer right away. I let it ring, allowing the panic on the other end to build with every chime. Only on the 5th call did I casually swipe across the screen. "Vesper, where have you been hiding?" "Why haven't you been answering your phone?" Theron shouted, his voice cracking with absolute panic. "Do you have any idea what this family is going through right now? Apex Holdings is burying my business in debt claims. Creasa just got fired. You get yourself back here right now. Bring every cent of cash and every piece of jewelry you have stored away. This is your duty as a wife, so stop playing these childish games. Do you hear me? If you do not come back and save my company, I swear you will regret it for the rest of your life." I let out a soft, freezing chuckle. My voice came through the line, steady, sharp, and stripped of any warmth. "Theron, have you lost your mind? Last night you and your mother threw me out of that house. Your sister struck me across the face and called me a maid and a parasite. Where do you think a so-called parasite is going to pull millions of dollars from to save your crumbling business? Weren't you all bragging about that $400,000 salary? Weren't you proud of the superior Sterling family background? Go handle your own mess. I have zero obligation to clean up after your family ever again. I will return to that house," I added quietly, "but not to rescue you. I am coming to take back what belongs to me." I hung up before Theron could utter another word. In this game, I set the rules. Since they love tearing each other down, I was going to let them face the full weight of their own choices. I turned toward my assistant standing at the door and gave the order to bring the car around. It was time to head back to the estate. I was no longer the compliant homemaker. I was the final authority arriving to deliver their reckoning. The story was only getting started, and I wanted to see Creasa's pride completely dismantled under my heels. A sleek black Maybach pulled up smoothly outside the wrought iron gates of the Sterling estate. The driver in a black suit stepped out immediately to open my door. I stepped onto the stone driveway, the very path I had walked barefoot in the freezing rain the night before. Today, the Chicago sunlight was blinding, reflecting off my tailored cream silk suit with an undeniable presence of authority. The front door was left ajar. I pushed it open and walked inside. A stale, sour smell hit me right away. The acidic odor of spilled red wine soaked into the rug from the night before, spoiled food sitting out in the kitchen, and the heavy silence of total defeat. The grand living room that had looked so glamorous hours ago now looked like a disaster zone. Theron and Lenora were sitting amidst the mess, looking completely broken. Hearing the sharp click of heels against the floor, they snapped their heads up. At first, their eyes registered sheer shock at my pristine, high-end appearance. But within seconds, their deep-seated arrogance rushed back in, burying their confusion. Without saying a single word, I walked straight to the glass coffee table, dropping my leather handbag onto the surface with a solid thud. I pulled out a crisp, white document, already signed with my sharp signature at the bottom. Arch. Printed across the top in bold black letters was the petition for dissolution of marriage. I slid the divorce papers across the glass table until they came to a complete stop right in front of Theron. 5 years of sacrificed youth, 5 years of swallowing humiliation as an unpaid servant. All of it was going to be cleanly severed by these few sheets of paper. Ouch. I looked at Theron with zero sadness and zero hesitation, only the complete indifference you would show a stranger on the street. Vesper, what kind of ridiculous stunt is this? Theron scoffed, looking my outfit up and down. What is with this costume? Who did you borrow those clothes from just to come back here and play dress-up? Divorce papers? Have you lost your mind? Orch. My company is drowning in liabilities. I am on the verge of total collapse, and instead of going out to secure loans to help me, you pull this selfish, dramatic move and demand a divorce? He pointed at me mockingly. Do you honestly think life on your own is going to be easy? Look at your resume for the past 5 years. It is completely blank, with zero corporate experience. Arch. What company in their right mind would ever hire you? Take this garbage back, go upstairs, grab every savings passbook and every piece of jewelry you have. I need to liquidate them this afternoon to pay off the bank interest, or this entire house is going up for foreclosure. Look at her, acting like she has wings, Lenora sneered from the couch. Orch. You think buying a cheap, knockoff suit off a discount rack turns you into a corporate boss? Theron, tear that paper up right now. There will be no divorce. You are the daughter-in-law of this family. When things were great, you lived off us. Now that we are hitting a rough patch, you think you can just pack up and walk away? Not a chance. Lenora pointed a trembling finger at me. Orch. Listen to me, Spur. Kriza lost her position today, and the company's funding has dried up completely. You are the bad omen that brought all this misfortune down on us. You need to take responsibility. Call your parents in the countryside right now. Tell them to mortgage their property and bring the cash over to bail out your husband. Orch. If you cannot get the funds, I will drive out to your parents' place myself and let every single one of their neighbors know what an ungrateful daughter they raised. Mother Theron, are the two of you still stuck in that delusional dream? My voice dropped dangerously low. Mortgage my parents' home to save your failing business? Orch. 5 years ago, I liquidated my own inheritance and borrowed from my contacts to rescue you once. How did you repay me? You treated me like dirt, watched Kriza slap me across the face, and called me a maid. Now that your business is blacklisted and Kriza is terminated by Apex Holdings, you expect me to beg on the street to save you? Do you really believe the world operates on your terms? Orch. Sign the papers, I commanded with absolute authority. I am not asking for a single broken plate from this house. As for your $15 million liability, you created that financial hole, and you can deal with the consequences yourself. I have zero legal obligation to carry your debt. How dare you call my business failing? Theron exploded in fury. What do you even know about commerce? Orch. Apex Holdings cut ties because they conspired with my competitors to push me out. Kriza was let go because of internal office politics and jealousy. A woman who spent 5 years hiding in a kitchen knows nothing about how real business operates. Theron grabbed the pen from the table. Get out! Get out of my house! Orch. Let us see how long you survive after this divorce. Without me paying the bills, you will end up cleaning dishes and sweeping floors just to get by. You want me to sign? I will sign it right now. Take your pathetic attitude and get out of my sight. Gritting his teeth, Theron scribbled his name across the divorce agreement, then slammed the pen onto the glass. Orch. He lifted his chin, staring at me with pure defiance and mockery. Lenora stood beside him, rolling her eyes and muttering under her breath. They were completely convinced that without the Sterling family's protection, I would drown in financial ruin. They had no idea that this signed document was not the end of my story, but the official start of their total accountability. Orch. I picked up the signed papers, folded them neatly, and placed them into my bag. I took one last look around the house. So much quiet patience had been wasted here, but from today on, this place would stand only as a monument to their own undoing. I turned around, the sound of my heels keeping a steady rhythm across the floor. Porch. Reaching the front entrance, I paused and looked back at the mother and son standing among the leftover trash. I offered them a brilliant, razor-sharp smile. "Enjoy your final days in this mansion," I told them calmly, "because very soon, the bank will be arriving to repossess it. Porch. And Theron, prepare yourself for what Apex Holdings has planned next, because that $15 million is only the opening chapter." Theron shouted a curse, grabbing a crystal glass and throwing it toward me, but it shattered harmlessly near the doorway. I pushed the door open, stepped out toward the idling Maybach, and left their panicked shouts far behind as the car pulled away. Porch. The separation was clean and complete. I had removed the legal obstacle of marriage. From this moment forward, I could act purely as their primary corporate creditor, enforcing every contract and holding them accountable through the full power of the law. While I was driving across Chicago, Krisa was going through the most agonizing hours of her life. Porch. She could not accept being terminated so abruptly. She used every remaining industry connection she had, making frantic phone calls to dig up the real reason behind her dismissal. She even wired money to a junior HR staffer at Apex Holdings, begging for any confidential information. The answer she received completely shattered her reality. Porch. The employee secretly sent her a clear photo of the original termination directive, stamped with the corporate seal of the parent company. At the very bottom of that document, directly above the title of board chair of Apex Holdings, was a bold, unmistakably familiar signature. Vesper Vance. Porch. The exact name of the sister-in-law she had insulted, slapped, and called a domestic servant the night before. The very person she had dismissed as an unproductive dependent. That exact name was sitting at the absolute top of the multinational conglomerate Krisa had spent years trying to impress. Krisa stared at her phone screen, her eyes wide with shock, her entire body trembling violently. Porch. Her breath caught in her throat. She rubbed her eyes over and over, muttering in disbelief, terrified of the reality staring back at her. That signature, that handwriting, it was identical to the handwriting that had spent nights editing her resume 5 years ago. There was no coincidence. There were not two people with that exact name and that exact signature. Porch. As the truth sank into her mind, panic took over completely. She screamed, dropping her phone onto the floor. Her mind raced with endless questions. How could Vesper, the girl from an ordinary background, be the board chair of Apex Holdings? How could someone she considered a dependent hold absolute authority over the entire corporate group? Porch. If Vesper was the chair, then Theron's contract cancellation had come directly from her as well. Every illusion of her own corporate power collapsed instantly. She finally realized that her achievements had never been about raw talent, and certainly not about superior family genetics. Porch. Every major account she had closed, every corporate promotion, and that $400,000 salary had all been quietly authorized by the very sister-in-law she looked down on. She had simply been an employee benefiting from a system I had built. "Hello? Krisa, where are you?" Lenora's panicked voice came through the laptop sitting on Krisa's desk. They had initiated a video call. Porch. "Why has your phone been off all morning? Everything at home is falling apart. Your brother's company is about to be locked down by creditors, and I am losing my mind. That Vesper came back here looking ridiculous, threw divorce papers in your brother's face, and we kicked her out. That woman is going to end up with nothing on the street." Porch. "Have you asked the senior executives at your firm if anyone can help us? We need to resolve this $15 million liability right now. Krisa, are you listening?" "Why are you breathing like that?" Theron leaned into the camera frame. "Krisa, call the CEO of Apex Holdings directly. Tell him that as a director there, you demand a meeting to renegotiate. Orch. I just signed the divorce papers with Vesper, and my head is spinning. This entire house is a mess. Don't just sit there. You lost your job, but you can always find another one with your credentials. My company is my life's work, and I cannot lose it. Use your head. Go flatter them, plead with them, do whatever it takes to get them to back off. Orch. Through the vehicle tracking and audio feed still operating from Theron's car, I heard every word of their conversation. They were still counting on their golden child to save the day, completely unaware that she had already fallen into absolute despair. Cresa did not give them a normal answer. Orch. The only sound coming through her end was rapid, shallow breathing, choked sobs, and a sudden scream of pure panic. She yelled at the screen, her voice breaking completely. Mother, Theron, we are completely ruined. Do you have any idea who the board chair of Apex Holdings is? It's Vesper, the exact woman you just forced into a divorce. She is the one who fired me. Orch, she is the one who cut off your company. We crossed the one person we should have never touched. Hearing Cresa's scream, Theron and Lenora froze as if struck by lightning. Dead silence filled the room. Theron dropped his phone. Lenora collapsed back onto the sofa. The reality was so sudden and overwhelming that their minds could barely process it. Orch. Vesper, the quiet homemaker, was the head of the entire corporate conglomerate? It sounded impossible. Yet Cresa's sheer panic, combined with the exact timing of the firing and the contract cancellations, confirmed every detail. They began to replay my calm demeanor from the night before, the tailored suit, and the luxury vehicle that morning. Orch. Every piece of the puzzle locked together with total clarity, showing them the exact reality they had created for themselves. Cresa did not wait for their reply. Overwhelmed by bitterness, shock, and total defeat, she needed to confront me directly. She needed to see it with her own eyes and demand to know why I had kept it hidden for so many years. Orch. Using what remained of her corporate access, she tracked down my schedule. That afternoon, Board Chair Vesper Vance was scheduled to inspect the corporate headquarters in the Chicago Loop. She hailed a cab, rushing toward the glass skyscraper downtown. She wanted a confrontation, determined to challenge me and claim she had been misled. Orch. What she failed to realize was that the corporate tower was the exact place where her final illusions would be answered with cold, hard facts. The pressure on the Sterling family had landed, and now the full outcome was about to take its course. The main ground floor lobby of Apex Holdings in downtown Chicago was vast and impressive, lined with polished Italian marble. Orch. Wearing a sharp charcoal power suit, I stepped out of the private executive elevator, flanked by Arthur, over a dozen senior vice presidents, and my security team. The quiet professional atmosphere of the lobby was suddenly broken by loud shouting near the revolving glass doors. Cresa Sterling was being held back firmly by two building security guards. Orch. Her designer outfit was disheveled, her hair unkempt, and her eyes bloodshot with intense frustration. The moment she spotted me, she began struggling forward, calling out my name. She shouted for me to face her, demanding that I restore what she felt she had legitimately earned. I gave a subtle hand signal to the security team, instructing them to let her through. Orch. I wanted every corporate employee in that lobby to see the reality of how her career had actually been built. Cresa rushed forward, but my personal security stopped her a few feet away. Looking past the guards, she pointed directly at my face, breathing heavily. Her eyes held a chaotic mix of anger, disbelief, and genuine intimidation at the undeniable authority I held in the room. Orch. She shouted, demanding to know why I had hidden my identity and accusing me of manipulating her family. She claimed I had pretended to be a homemaker just to trap them, calling my actions calculated and vindictive. She insisted that every project she had closed was through her own competence, screaming that I had no legal right to dismiss her or erase her hard work over a personal grievance. Orch. I stood with my hands behind my back, observing her outburst calmly. Around the lobby, dozens of professionals paused in their tracks, watching the scene unfold. My complete composure stood in stark contrast to her distress. I took a single step forward, the sound of my heel clicking sharply against the marble floor. I looked directly into her eyes and offered a calm, composed smile. "Orch, you want to talk about your competence, Kreza?" My voice was not loud, but it carried across the entire open lobby with absolute weight. "You truly believe that $400,000 salary and that director title were awarded because of your personal brilliance?" I paused briefly. "Let me refresh your memory. Orch. 3 years ago, you interviewed at 6 different firms and were rejected by every single one because you could not even properly analyze an income statement and balance sheet. Who spent 3 consecutive nights fixing your work and preparing your materials? I did. You think you entered Apex Holdings purely on merit. The HR department adjusted their hiring parameters under my direct instructions. Orch. And that East District development project you claim credit for? After your disastrous presentation, I quietly adjusted our corporate margins by 5% just to secure the client's signature on a contract that carried your name." Kreza took a step back, the color completely draining from her face. The facts dismantled every narrative she had built around her own success. "Orch." She shook her head in denial, refusing to accept the truth of her situation. "You were supported every step of the way," I said, my gaze cutting straight through her pretenses. "I placed you in that position so your mother would have something to speak proudly of at her club, and so your brother could maintain his standing. Orch. I believed that by quietly lifting your family up, you might develop genuine appreciation. Instead, you turned on the very person supporting you. You took the resources I built, used them to look down on me, and treated me like household staff. You thought you were running the show, but you were merely living on the foundation of my work." I let the reality settle in completely. "Orch, your termination today is not personal. It is simply aligning your standing with your actual professional capability. Moving forward, with a formal termination on your record at Apex Holdings, you will find out very quickly what the open market truly thinks of your skill set. Vesper, please. Vesper, I am begging you. Orch. I admit I was completely wrong." A desperate voice suddenly crackled from the floor. Kreeza's phone had fallen during the commotion and the video call was still running. Through the cracked glass, I could see the pale, panicked faces of Theron and Lenora. They were openly weeping, every trace of their earlier arrogance replaced by pure desperation. Orch. They saw the reality of the corporate lobby, and they finally understood the depth of the legal and financial trouble they were facing. "I was blind," Lenora cried out. "I was foolish. Please spare Kreza. Please save Theron's company. I will apologize properly. I will do whatever it takes." "I swear, Vesper, I was wrong, completely wrong." Theron pleaded through the screen as well. "Orch. I haven't filed the divorce papers with the court yet. We can tear them up right now. You are the chair, you have the capital, please save my business one more time. $15 million is nothing to you, but it is everything to me. I promise I will treat you with complete respect. My mother and Kreza will take care of everything for you. Come home, Vesper, we can still fix this family. Orch. Please show some grace." Looking at the screen, I felt only cold detachment. I leaned down, picked up the phone, and looked straight into the camera at their panicked expressions. My tone was freezing cold. Save the performance. When you assumed I had nothing, you treated me with complete contempt. I have zero interest in false apologies. Orch. That $15 million will be collected down to the last cent. Theron, prepare your paperwork because the estate and your business assets will be surrendered to the lenders. As for the divorce, my legal team has already submitted the signed petition to Cook County Court. We will meet in a courtroom, not as a family, but as a creditor, enforcing legal obligations against a debtor. Orch. I let go of the phone. It hit the floor, and I stepped down with my heel, cracking the screen and ending the call permanently. Kreza collapsed onto the marble floor, burying her face in her hands and sobbing uncontrollably. There was no defiance left in her, only the overwhelming realization that her career, her financial status, and her family's standing were completely gone. Porch. I adjusted my jacket, turned away without a second glance, and headed toward the executive elevator, leaving the entire situation behind me. The confrontation was finished, and the legal process was now fully in motion. I intended to let the legal and financial system run its course, holding them entirely accountable for their own actions. A severe heat wave settled over Chicago. Porch. The rising heat from the pavement mirrored the financial pressure mounting against Theron's business. Sitting in my corner office at the top of Apex Holdings, surrounded by greenery and panoramic views, I reviewed a confidential briefing my assistant had just placed on my desk. The liabilities on Theron's corporate balance sheet were overwhelming. Porch. The moment Apex canceled the supply contracts and demanded debt settlement, the domino effect began. Commercial lenders froze his operating accounts immediately. Subcontractors, staff, and smaller vendors gathered outside his headquarters, demanding overdue payments. The man who had acted like an untouchable executive was now sneaking out of back exits to avoid process servers. Porch. Through the security feeds still active at the Sterling mansion, I watched the final unraveling of their household. The loss of wealth stripped away every remaining pretense of family unity, revealing their complete self-interest. Theron kicked open the front door, looking completely disheveled. Porch. His expensive shirt was torn from dealing with angry creditors, his face bruised, and his eyes dark with exhaustion. Inside the living room, the mess from the birthday party still sat neglected. Creasa lay motionless on the sofa, her eyes hollow. Lenora was pacing the room aimlessly, muttering in panic. Theron kicked the glass table in frustration, the sharp noise startling both women. Porch. He pointed a shaking finger at his mother and sister, his voice strained with anger as he turned on his own family. "Are you happy now?" he shouted. "Look at what happened! My company, everything I built, ruined because of you. Whose fault is this?" "It's Creasa's arrogance and your endless disrespect, Mother." Porch. "If you hadn't teamed up to mistreat Vesper last night, if you hadn't hit her and thrown her out, would we be in this situation today? Apex froze my accounts. The bank just served a foreclosure notice on this house. We are losing everything, do you understand?" "Have you lost your mind, Theron?" Lenora screamed back. "You come home and shout at your own mother and sister?" Porch. "Who could have guessed she was the board chair of that conglomerate? She lived in this house for 5 years, slept under your roof, and kept a massive fortune hidden. She planned this. You were her husband. How could you be clueless about her finances? You failed to manage your own household. Now that your business is going under, you attack your own family? Call her right now," Lenora demanded. Porch. "Use your 5-year marriage, apologize, plead with her, do whatever you have to do. Marriage?" Theron laughed, bitterly. "You still want to bring up marriage? She had me sign the divorce papers right in front of you. Do you think she is someone you can just push around and win back with cheap words? She is running a multi-billion-dollar operation. What about you, Creasa?" Porch. "Where is your $400,000 salary now? Step up and pay off my corporate liabilities. I supported you when you were unemployed, and now that your actions triggered this, you just sit there? If I cannot settle that $15 million, I am facing corporate fraud investigations, and I will make sure the legal inquiry looks into everyone involved." Porch. On the screen, Creasa jumped up, lashing out at Theron with furious insults. She blamed him for being incompetent, blamed Lenora for enabling him, and screamed that if Theron had been a supportive husband who protected his wife, none of this would have happened. They argued endlessly, trading bitter accusations. Porch. Not one of them expressed genuine remorse for the way they had treated me. Their only regret was that they had crossed someone with real legal and financial power. The illusion of the Sterling family's close bond was completely broken. I took a sip of chamomile tea, feeling a steady sense of closure. Porch. When people are at the top, they often hide behind polite manners, but when their security is removed, their true character comes straight to the surface. They had looked down on me for years, claiming superior status, and now they were turning on each other over the remaining scraps of their lifestyle. What was most remarkable was Lenora's lingering assumption that a few apologies from her son could undo years of mistreatment. She still imagined I was the same accommodating person who would overlook everything at the first sign of regret. When someone steps out of an unhealthy environment and takes full control of their own life, their resolve becomes unshakable. My time, my dedication, and 5 years of patience had been completely dismissed by them. They had nothing left to offer. I instructed my assistant to maintain strict security in the lobby. I knew that once they finished blaming one another and realized there were no other options, they would eventually show up at the corporate office to plead their case. I had already prepared a transparent, professional setting to address them. A space surrounded by clear glass where their actions would be visible to everyone, matching the public setting where they had once tried to humiliate me. Just as expected, at 9 the next morning, the temperature in the Apex Holdings lobby rose with the arrival of unexpected visitors. Theron, Lenora, and Kriza appeared outside the revolving glass doors, completely stripped of their former polish. Theron wore a wrinkled shirt with dark circles under his eyes. Lenora was disheveled and pale. Kriza hid behind her mother, wearing a face mask to avoid the gaze of corporate employees. When they tried to push through security, the guards formed an immediate barrier. Theron tried to force his way in, claiming to be the husband of board chair Vesper Vance and demanding access to the executive suites. The security personnel responded with firm, quiet professionalism. Lenora resorted to creating a scene, pointing at the guards and threatening lawsuits, demanding to see management. She called out my name, claiming I was acting unfairly and using corporate power to ruin her family. Employees and visiting partners stopped in the lobby, observing the commotion. From my office, watching the live security feed, any remaining patience was entirely gone, replaced by a clear focus on concluding the matter. I pressed the intercom and instructed security to escort them into conference room 4 on the ground floor. The room was enclosed entirely in transparent glass, visible from all angles in the lobby. I wanted every interaction to take place in full view of the public, with complete transparency. I put on my blazer and took the elevator down to the first floor. When the conference room door opened, Theron and Lenora looked up as if grasping for a lifeline. Theron rushed forward to grab my arm, but security stepped between us smoothly, causing him to stumble back onto the sofa. Lenora dropped to the floor, reaching toward my shoes with tears streaming down her face, pleading for help. Kriza remained curled in the corner, shaking and avoiding all eye contact. The polished image of the Sterling family was completely gone. "Vesper, please, I am begging you," Lenora sobbed. "I was wrong. I spoke out of turn. Think of the 5 years you spent in our home. Think of how I looked after you when you were unwell. Please spare Theron. The business is facing foreclosure and the bank is taking the house. I am too old to lose everything. You are managing billions. 15 million is nothing to your firm, but it is everything to us. Drop the debt claims. I promise Kree'll show you complete respect from now on. We will treat you properly, just help us." "I am so sorry," Theron pleaded. "I know I failed you. I was weak and I did not stand up for you when my family was out of line. But what we built over 5 years was real. I cared about you and I promised you a good life. I let corporate stress and money cloud my judgment, and I said terrible things. I know you still care, otherwise you would never have helped me back then. I will change. I won't go through with the divorce. I will spend the rest of my life making it right. Just instruct the firm to restore the contracts and dismiss the legal claims. We can start fresh." I looked down at them with total detachment, stepping back from Lenora's reach. I took a seat in the leather armchair in the center of the room, crossed my legs, and watched them calmly. A quiet, cold smile appeared on my face. George. They really believed they could resolve years of mistreatment with dramatic apologies. Care? Dedication? Looking after me when I was unwell? I spoke with absolute precision, every word addressing the reality of what had happened. The care you speak of was leaving cold leftovers on the counter while I was running a severe fever and expecting me to clean up after myself. George. And the stress you put on me during that time cost me my health and the child I was carrying. I turned to Theron. The devotion you keep talking about? Was that what you felt when you stood there like an idle bystander, watching your sister splash boiling broth across my legs, strike my face, and call me domestic help without saying a single word? Keep your shallow apologies to yourself. George. $15 million may be pocket change to my firm, but I would rather watch it dissolve into nothing than hand a single cent over to ungrateful, two-faced opportunists. Begging for mercy, I scoffed. Do you honestly think your shallow apologies carry $15 million in value? I looked over at my former sister-in-law, who was still curled up in the corner. George. And what about you, Kriza? Where did all that executive arrogance go? Why aren't you speaking up now? Weren't you the one calling me an unpaid maid and a parasite? And yet, here is that exact person holding the ultimate decision over your entire family's financial future. How does it feel to watch your entire world unravel overnight? Let me tell you right now, this is only the tip of the iceberg. George. You thought this was just about debt recovery? You severely underestimated Vesper Vance. I gave a subtle signal to my assistant waiting outside. The glass door opened and he stepped in, placing a thick manila envelope on the conference table. The envelope was sealed with the official red wax stamps of a premier private investigation firm and a top corporate litigation practice. George. I tapped my fingers against the envelope, looking directly into Theron's eyes with steady, uncompromising focus. They still assumed this was a routine commercial dispute. They had no idea that inside this file lay the documented evidence that would permanently dismantle Theron's professional standing and expose the entire Sterling household. Genuine dread finally set in for Theron. George. He scrambled back against the sofa, cold sweat dripping down his face. His instincts were finally telling him that the consequences had arrived, and no amount of pleading would make them disappear. A heavy silence settled over the glass room. You could hear every breath. Lenora choked back her tears. Her glassy eyes locked onto the wax-sealed file. George. In the corner, Kriza's breathing turned shallow and erratic. Theron's face went from pale to completely gray. As someone who had operated in gray areas for years, he knew that a file sealed like this contained far more than basic loan agreements. George. I broke the wax seal with measured precision and pulled out a stack of high-resolution photographs, letting them slide across the glass surface until they stopped directly in front of Theron and Lenora. They were not landscape shots or innocent business meetings. They showed Theron outside a luxury 5-star hotel, embracing a high-fashion model. George. They showed him inside a high-end boutique on Michigan Avenue, personally purchasing a $100,000 diamond necklace for her. There were screenshots of the woman's social media posts, boasting about the keys to a brand new Porsche he had bought for her. George. And most telling of all was a copy of a 3-month prenatal ultrasound with her name on it, accompanied by a signed medical financial guarantor form bearing Theron's signature as the father. I was not finished. I pulled out a thick stack of certified bank statements. George. Highlighted in bright yellow was the clear trail of how millions of corporate dollars had been systematically transferred from his business accounts into Lenora's personal checking accounts, and then quietly wired into offshore trust funds registered under his partner's name. George. These transactions had taken place continuously over the past 2 years. The exact 2 years I had spent working in the kitchen, carefully clipping grocery coupons to save $5 here and there to maintain their household. Seeing the documented evidence spread out across the table, brought back the bitter reality of what I had tolerated. But with it came the total clarity of undeniable truth. Orch. Vesper. Vesper. Theron stammered, his words tripping over each other. You were tracking me. You set me up. These images are fabricated. You edited them to frame me so you could claim everything in the divorce settlement, didn't you? Mother, Cressa, do not listen to her. I would never go behind this family's back. Vesper, you cannot throw around baseless claims. Orch. I can take legal action for defamation, do you hear me? Theron, what on earth is this? Lenora gasped, completely ignoring his protests as her eyes scanned the banking records. Tell me the truth right now. Who is this woman? What 3-month pregnancy? You took corporate capital, all that hard-earned operating money, and used it to fund another life for years. Orch. No wonder the business was always short on cash and drowning in liabilities. You deceived me. You used my personal accounts as a pass-through to hide your side spending. You brought this entire collapse upon our family, Theron. After everything I did for you, you brought this absolute disaster to our door. Theron's feeble defense collapsed under the weight of his own mother's accusations. Orch. Lenora was shrewd enough to understand wire transfers. The moment she saw her own account numbers used as conduits, she realized she had been used as a shield for his unauthorized spending. I leaned back against the leather chair, crossing my legs with calm certainty. Every fact I laid out drove another nail into the coffin of our legal union. Defamation? Orch. Theron, would you like me to play the audio recordings? The ones where you promised to purchase a luxury penthouse for her, while calculating how to leave me with absolutely zero assets in a split. You assumed that because I managed the home, I was completely blind to financial movements. You thought I was oblivious to what was happening behind my back. You were wrong. Orch. From the very first unauthorized transfer, I documented every single dollar. I simply waited to see how far you would go. And you never failed to cross the line. You took high-interest bridge loans provided by Apex Holdings and diverted them into luxury vehicles and personal allowances for your companion. You hollowed out your own operating accounts until your firm became an empty shell. Orch. That $15 million liability did not happen because of a bad market. It happened because you drained your own company to play the generous provider for someone else. I gathered the photographs and set them down firmly on the glass table, making Theron flinch. Under Illinois state law, your actions constitute severe dissipation of marital assets and a blatant breach of fiduciary duty. Orch. Combined with corporate accounting fraud and federal wire fraud, the legal consequences will follow you for years. I looked directly at him, delivering the final terms. I have already submitted this complete dossier to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI and to my family law litigation team. The divorce agreement you signed yesterday was never about dividing assets with you. Orch. It was designed to ensure you walk away carrying every dollar of your personal debt and facing the full weight of federal oversight, leaving you with zero claims to the estate's remaining equity. Every asset tied to your name and your mother's accounts will be frozen and used to offset corporate defaults. Orch. Let us see if your lavish companion stays by your side once she discovers you are facing absolute insolvency and federal inquiries, or if she takes that sports car and vanishes without a trace. At that moment, Theron broke down completely. He slipped off the sofa onto the floor, clutching his head in both hands, letting out a raw, desperate groan. Orch. He finally understood that he was caught in an airtight legal net with zero exits. His money was gone, his company was liquidated, his family standing was erased, and criminal liability was closing in fast. The cost of his deceit and disrespect had come back around in the most complete way possible. Vesper, please, I am begging you, he sobbed openly. Orch. Call me whatever you want, do whatever you need to do, but please do not hand those files over to federal investigators. I cannot handle a prison sentence. My mother is elderly. Cressa has lost her career. Who will support them if I am gone? I promise I will surrender every remaining asset to your name. I will walk away with nothing. I will never step foot near you again. George, please, for the sake of our past, give me a way forward. I am begging you right here. I stood up smoothly, looking down at the man pleading on the floor with complete indifference. Our past? You traded that away the moment you bought luxury cars with corporate funds, so do not expect me to honor it. You laid the groundwork for your own undoing. Blame no one but yourself. George, you all treated me like domestic staff, assuming I had no voice and no leverage. Today you are simply seeing how the system holds you fully accountable. I turned toward my assistant. Have security escort these three out of the building. George, from this moment on, if any member of the Sterling family comes within 100 yards of Apex Holdings property, enforce standard corporate trespassing protocols immediately. I turned around, keeping my posture straight, without offering another glance at the shouting and tears behind me. George. Security moved in firmly, taking Theron and Lenora by the arms and guiding them out of the transparent conference room. Kriza followed quietly behind, completely defeated, trying to avoid being seen. This was more than just a successful outcome. The accountability was absolute. George. The legal system and financial reality would handle the rest, removing their influence from my life entirely and leaving a clear path ahead. Over the next few days, a steady gray autumn rain covered Chicago, setting a somber tone that seemed to mark the quiet end of the Sterling household status. George. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of my executive office, I reviewed detailed updates from my legal team and corporate auditors. Their downfall was moving even faster than anticipated. 3 days after our confrontation, court-appointed receivers arrived at the Sterling estate with formal repossession and foreclosure orders. George. Through video updates provided by my security team, I watched the entire scene unfold. The heavy iron gates were opened. Uniformed receivers walked through the estate, inventorying and sealing high-value furnishings, artwork, and electronics. The very luxury items Lenora had spent years admiring were cataloged and removed one by one. George. Theron, the man who had ordered me out into the rain, stood near the edge of the driveway with his shirt undone and his hair disheveled, staring blankly at the formal foreclosure notice posted on his front door. Every ounce of his earlier defiance was gone. Lenora, who had spent years intimidating neighbors with her displays of wealth, broke down entirely on the stone driveway. George. Her country club acquaintances stood across their manicured lawns, watching the proceedings in quiet conversation. For someone obsessed with social standing, that public loss of face was far worse than the loss of capital. She shouted, pleading with the recovery agents until the overwhelming stress took its toll. George. Overcome by the shock, she collapsed onto the driveway, experiencing a sudden medical emergency from a severe stroke. There was no private medical transport waiting. Theron and Kriza were forced to ask neighbors for basic cash just to secure a standard cab to take her to the county hospital. The difficulties did not stop with the loss of the estate. George. The corporate blacklist regarding Kriza worked with complete efficiency. Still holding on to her pride, Kriza submitted her resume to several major competitors of Apex Holdings. Convinced her past title would secure another lucrative role. She was mistaken. The corporate sector is pragmatic. George. No executive was willing to hire an individual carrying a formal ethical termination and blacklisting directive signed by the board chair of Apex Holdings. During one interview, a senior recruiter dismissed her credentials outright, making it clear that firms had zero interest in candidates flagged for severe professional misconduct across the corporate network. George. Deeply humiliated, Kriza walked out of the building. Moving from an executive driving a company vehicle, she found herself applying for entry-level leasing roles in strip malls, and even those opportunities turned her away. That $400,000 salary was now a distant memory. The final blow fell squarely on Theron, dismantling his last remaining hope. George. With his business shut down and his assets seized, Theron took what little cash he had left and rushed to find his partner, the woman he believed was carrying his child and with whom he planned to start over. He thought she would be his ultimate refuge. In reality, relationships built entirely on designer gifts and luxury spending evaporate the moment the funding stops. Trixie! George. Open the door! Theron's voice echoed down the hallway of a downtown luxury apartment building in the video log provided by my investigators. It's me, Theron. Pack your things. We need to sell the Porsche. We need to find somewhere to lay low. The company ran into issues and the lenders are freezing everything. But with the cash from the car, I can rebuild. George. You are carrying my child. We are supposed to be a team. Why did you change the locks? Why did you block my number? Open the door. I have nowhere else to turn. My mother is in the hospital. Krisa has no job. You are all I have left. Theron, stop making a scene. Lenora's raspy voice came through a video call on his phone, interrupted by heavy coughing from her hospital bed. George. Why are you still looking for that woman? She played you, son. The building management confirmed that apartment was subleased and cleared out yesterday. The pregnancy was completely fake. She bought a falsified ultrasound just to extract cash from you. And that Porsche you bought her? She transferred the title, sold it for cash, and left the city with someone else. Open your eyes. George, you discarded your real marriage for a scam. You drained your company, ruined this family, and now you have nothing. She is never coming back. How could you be so blind? Watching Theron collapse against the locked door in complete despair, while Lenora wept over the phone, I could only shake my head at the predictability of it all. They had turned on each other until nothing was left. George. Theron finally realized that every single thing was gone. His company, his capital, his marriage, and the illusion of his new life. He struck the concrete wall in frustration until his hands were bruised. The fragile empire built on baseless pride, social prejudice, and mismanaged funds had completely burned away. They had once used their financial standing to strip away my dignity. Now, their own financial mismanagement had consumed them entirely. Yet, from a legal standpoint, one final step remained. I wanted everything finalized before a judge on the public record, ensuring the legal boundaries were set permanently. My litigation team had prepared an airtight case covering marital asset dissipation and corporate financial misconduct. The trial date for the divorce and asset distribution was formally scheduled. The conclusion was already set. I was simply waiting for the final ruling. At 8 o'clock in the morning, my car arrived outside the Cook County Courthouse. The morning sky was a deep gray, with autumn winds sweeping across the plaza. I stepped out wearing a tailored black suit, my hair styled sharply, dark sunglasses shielding my expression. Behind me walked a dedicated team of top commercial and family law litigators, ready to ensure the divorce decree and financial allocations were executed without compromise. With total confidence, Vesper Vance walked through the courthouse doors. At the far end of the hallway, the Sterling family appeared. Compared to the polished man who had stood beside me years ago, Theron was barely recognizable. He wore a rumpled shirt, his face drawn and covered in uneven stubble. Lenora leaned heavily on a walking cane, looking frail and worn. Krisa stood quietly behind them, wearing an oversized hoodie to shield her face from financial reporters who had caught wind of the high-profile corporate litigation. Seeing my legal team approach, a mixture of anxiety and defeat washed over their faces. They understood that the courtroom doors would close on their final chances of recovery. The proceedings were swift and completely decisive. The presiding judge reviewed the overwhelming documentation submitted by my attorneys. Every diverted dollar, every unauthorized offshore transfer, every piece of surveillance, and every financial ledger was laid bare under standard evidentiary scrutiny. My lead counsel systematically demonstrated that Theron had engaged in severe dissipation of marital assets alongside corporate accounting manipulation, inflicting undeniable harm on the marital estate. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. Theron sat at the defense table, his knuckles white as he gripped his hands together, perspiration forming on his brow. He had zero counter-evidence to offer. The public defender sitting beside him remained largely quiet, unable to challenge the certified financial records. "Your Honor," Theron's voice cracked as he spoke. "I acknowledge my mistakes, but that company was built through my daily efforts. Those assets were the result of my work. She was a stay-at-home spouse who did not manage corporate operations. Please, you cannot leave me with nothing. I am facing a $15 million liability to Apex Holdings. Vesper, please, for the sake of the 5 years we shared, ask the court for leniency. You already lead a major enterprise, why pursue every last asset from me? Are you trying to push me completely over the edge?" "Your Honor," Lenora cried out from the gallery. "Look at what is happening here." She kept her executive standing hidden and let this situation develop. "My son made errors, but he is human and needs a way to live. Please rule fairly and let us retain the residential property so we have a roof over our heads. Otherwise, we will have nothing left." "Vesper, I am pleading with you," Lenora sobbed openly in court. "Withdraw the claims. Let Theron rebuild." I sat calmly at the plaintiff's table, showing no reaction to their appeals. When the judge granted me permission to address the court, I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and looked directly toward the bench before facing Theron and Lenora. My voice was clear, measured, and entirely steady. "Your Honor, the defendant claims I contributed nothing and acted merely as a dependent. I must ask, 5 years ago, when his firm faced imminent insolvency, who liquidated personal inheritance and mobilized alumni resources to stabilize his business? Who managed every detail of the household, allowing him the freedom to operate his business and mismanage corporate capital? His so-called achievements were built directly on my personal sacrifices and silent labor. The defendant violated state statutes, breached fiduciary obligations, and dissipated marital funds. Now, facing standard legal accountability, he asks for unwarranted leniency. The law does not reward bad faith and deliberate misconduct. I request that the court divide the remaining marital estate in light of the defendant's documented dissipation, pierce the corporate veil to hold him personally liable for diverted funds, and declare that I bear zero responsibility for liabilities arising from his fraudulent commercial dealings." The judge brought the gavel down, concluding the matter. The final judgment was rendered. Due to proven dissipation of marital assets and gross breach of fiduciary duty, the petition for dissolution of marriage was granted. As equitable distribution and compensation, all remaining equity in the marital estate, including property values, was awarded entirely to the plaintiff. The defendant, Theron Sterling, was assigned sole personal responsibility for the $15 million corporate liability to Apex Holdings. He walked out of that courtroom with absolutely nothing. No real estate, no enterprise, overwhelming personal liability, and pending federal reviews regarding wire fraud. The trial was over. Walking out of the building, the weight I had carried for 5 years lifted completely. In the corridor, Theron suddenly stumbled forward, dropping to the tiled floor and reaching toward my path. Tears ran down his face as he pleaded for relief. Lenora shuffled forward as well, calling out in distress. Kreza remained at a distance, completely frozen in place. "Vesper, please!" Theron cried. "Do not let this stand. You received the judgment. Just instruct Apex Holdings to forgive the debt balance. Otherwise, federal authorities will take action. My mother cannot handle this. I will do whatever you ask. Just show some mercy." I looked down at him calmly, stepping back out of his reach. I smoothed my trousers, entirely undisturbed. I leaned down slightly, speaking in a low, even tone that left zero room for doubt. "Theron, do you remember that rainy night when Kreza struck my face? You pointed at me and told me to leave with nothing on the street. Did you show any consideration then?" When your mother insulted me and threatened to harass my family, did she show any restraint? Orch. The outcome you are facing today is the direct result of the choices you made. From this moment on, your circumstances are entirely your own responsibility. Live with the reality you built for yourself. I turned around and walked down the wide hallway with steady, purposeful steps. Their shouts faded into the background, without slowing my pace for a single second. Orch. The glass doors of the courthouse opened. The gray clouds parted, and clean, bright sunlight filled the city streets. The resolution was complete. The past was closed permanently, and my life was entirely my own again. A full year has passed since I walked out of those courthouse doors. My life has moved into a completely fresh chapter, peaceful and grounded. Orch. This morning I woke up in a high-rise penthouse overlooking downtown Chicago. As the automated shades opened, soft morning light filled the space, resting on fresh flowers on the table. I brewed a cup of black coffee and stepped out onto the balcony, looking across the waking skyline. Orch. The cool breeze carried a sense of freedom and calm that I had not experienced in all the years spent in that household. As for the Sterlings, their situation became a well-known cautionary tale within local business circles. A few months ago, my assistant mentioned their status during a routine update. Orch. Unable to settle his liabilities, Theron was formally indicted by federal prosecutors and sentenced to 8 years in federal custody for wire fraud and misappropriation of funds. He now has ample time to reflect on his choices and the betrayal of the one person who had truly supported his career. Orch. Lenora, having suffered severe health setbacks following the loss of the estate and her son's legal outcome, remains largely incapacitated, living in subsidized assisted housing on the outskirts of the Rust Belt. Orch. And Krisa, who once boasted about her corporate income while mistreating others, works long shifts at a local roadside diner, clearing tables and balancing daily expenses to cover her mother's basic medical needs. The consequences they faced were severe, but they were the direct outcome of their own actions. Orch. Looking back at the challenges I navigated, there is a fundamental truth worth sharing with anyone who feels diminished in an unhealthy relationship or undervalued, simply because their contributions are not tied to a traditional paycheck. Never surrender your independence or place your entire future in the hands of someone else. Partnership is meaningful, but it must be built on genuine respect. Orch. When you compromise your own identity and set aside your skills to step in entirely behind someone else, ungrateful people will rarely show appreciation. Often, they simply begin taking your presence for granted, viewing your support as something owed. Orch. The greatest strength anyone can carry is not outward appearance or the ability to accommodate others. It is sharp intellect, inner resilience, and total financial independence. The knowledge you build and the value you create through your own dedication are the only things that will never fail you. Orch. When you control your own career and financial standing, you maintain the authority to shape your own life. You have the strength to stand tall against disrespect, the leverage to remove unhealthy influences from your environment, and the clarity to build a future on your own terms. Never back down. Never lose faith in your own capability. Orch. When life presents a storm, step forward with steady confidence and claim the success that belongs to you.